bring
my
some sort of
bag.
OSHA safety like that. Right?
Yeah, that's good.
And
They go stairs.
Do I have the usually gloats that she does?
Thank you. I'll take the gavel.
Okay, 3 seconds.
3 seconds.
Okay, we're there.
Is the recorder on, Beth?
24 hours later.
Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order. We're going to do it, the police are going to give their report, but first I want to advise you that we have the recorder on, so if anybody makes comments, please give your name and address. But we'll start with the officer.
Can I stand here as normal?
Yeah, sure,
Good? Okay.
sure.
For those of you I haven't met, I'm Mike Pratt. I'm the sergeant here with Nick Pacerno. Just a couple things real quick to touch base on. In and around the village here, town of Chevy Chase, village of Chevy Chase, a lot of in between Connecticut and then what I would call Brookville Road here. Over the past 3 or 4 months, the flavor of those months has been residential burglaries. And these burglaries are, some of them are high-end burglaries. If you've heard about some of the things that have been going on in the town of Chevy Chase, I like to try to point out that, I guess for lack of a better term, it was sort of like this urban legend or myth that when somebody knocks at your door and you aren't expecting anybody, just sit there and don't do anything about it. Okay? Don't do that. We're finding a lot of times that burglars will walk up posing as utility people or whatever, knock on the door, and when they don't get an answer after banging on the door and banging on the windows, that's a sign that nobody's home. And when you're sitting in there listening to it, you know, you don't want to be there when your door gets kicked in. So we're telling everybody to respond. You don't have to answer if you don't want to. Say, hey, I'm home, please leave. I'm calling the police, whatever you feel comfortable doing. But if you're home and you hear somebody knocking on the door and you don't know who it is, respond to them in some form or fashion. Because that's what a lot of these are. We're also finding that over the course of the Christmas season here in the village, we didn't have a lot of issues with the package. Okay? As residents, you need to be on the lookout for delivery men that might have a package in their hand, walk up, walk to the back of the house, walk around the front again, walk to the back, because that's the easiest way for also them to figure out who's home and who's not. And they might have a legitimate reason to be there, but not. So what we're asking is that people remain vigilant. I have been here obviously overnight. I'm sure a bunch of you see me sitting here a lot. I'll come in plain clothes sometimes, and there's actually a breath of fresh air. Probably about three weeks ago, I was walking around the village here in plain clothes, and I had my flashlight just walking, and sure as heck, an alert resident anonymously called, but they called and they said, hey, there's a big guy walking around with a flashlight. He was over here on Thornapple. And I hear it, and I'm just like, awesome, you know, can I talk to him? They said, no, it was anonymous, but that's what it takes. You know, Nick and I are only here for 5 hours a week, and we need a lot of help. And a lot of the issues that we've had countywide, robberies, burglaries, it's citizens that call, and that's how we catch, you know, people in the act. So one last thing, I know we got a complaint, Matt, you just sent it about traffic along here in Brookville. You all have lived here, you know the issues that are there. If you see anything in particular that needs immediacy or is, you know, needs to be acted on now, please call our non-emergency number 301-279-8000. If it's something that's an overall thing, maybe on one of our streets here, that's something that Nick or I could sit on and pay extra attention to, please, like you do, just email you know, the village office there, and then they immediately forward everything to us. I've been trying to concentrate a lot of my time Thornapple, Chestnut, Delfield, the stop signs and everything that are routinely run on a regular basis. And I will say a lot of them are by village residents as well. You know, so keep that in mind. Same thing over on Raymond Cummings, those things, although they aren't as, I guess, prevalent over there unless it's the major cut through. But anything I could do, let us know. Any questions for me?
I got one quick one.
Go ahead, please.
There's a guy that comes out Thornapple with a convertible, blue guy, convertible. 6:15 to 6:45, just blows right through every stop sign. We yell at him all the time. He just smiles.
Resident or just?
No, he goes on the other side of Summit. But it's like clockwork. I think it's usually 6:30, 6:45.
Driving home.
Yeah, it was no, but he just goes right on through. Like you've seen him.
Rush hours are probably your big times here, obviously, for
He
cut-throughs
just,
and
I mean, he
everything
just
like that.
slow
so
down. He just barrels.
That 6:30 in the morning?
No, in the
No, in the
evening.
evening.
Every night you see him coming down.
That's what time.
I was giving him an earful the other night. He just like, I totally be assaulted if I threw something at him.
I wanted to say, I appreciated your comment that a lot of the offenses are by some of our neighbors. And I, we are right on that corner where those stop signs are ignored so much, and we're aware of that. So I'm glad to, I guess what I'm saying is I'm glad to know that you know that. And
We're aware of it, and if you live down there, you'll see me stopping people, and that's the, it just takes a normal, listen, this is your neighborhood, you're the reason why I'm here. It also makes it very difficult for me as an officer to try to handle the cut-through people that are flying through the neighborhood just to get down to beach or whatever, and I'm going to write them a ticket, but then the same exact thing happens to residents here, and I'm supposed to, deal with that in the same fashion. And it's difficult because we want to make this area as safe as we can, but at the same time, I'm also sort of hampered by what I can do on every stop. So just, I spread the word to every resident that I see, or even when they wave, just, you live here, this is your neighborhood, let's keep it as safe as it can be. So, go ahead.
What represents a stop versus not a stop? Because
The beauty's in the eye of the beholder. If you want to go by the state law, or it's the cease of movement, the ceasing of movement. Now, I don't know very many people that do that. I certainly don't do that. But, you want to come to a stop prior to the stop line as well.
Yes.
You see a lot of people that fly into the intersection and they'll stop and then they kind of look down the road and then they'll go. You have to stop before the stop line. But I think what we're here for, we're doing that, is the blatant people that just, they don't see anybody approaching it, and then that's just a green light for them to fly through. So, but in the strictest sense, you're supposed to come to a complete stop prior to the white line that's on the pavement, right at the stop line. So.
Just a point of clarification. So are you saying that you don't ticket residents?
No, I'm not. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it makes it difficult for me
But you're in a
whenever you.
position, of course. I see.
I don't want to say it's a conflict of interest, but I do. I don't know if anybody's ever complained about it or anything. And when I work in the township, it's the same thing, So, but what I will also do is people that might be cutting through, they might get a stern warning instead, knowing that I just spent 10 minutes talking to a resident about what they did, and I gave them a written warning, or I gave them a verbal warning. So it's difficult for Nick and I to do, progressive, sort of the same type of enforcement to everybody when residents are doing it. So.
And on average, how many tickets do you issue on that Thornapple Street where people?
I haven't pulled the things. I mean, again,
Just roughly.
if I'm there for 1 or 2 hours, I might make 2 or 3 stops, and those are the blatant ones that are, just plowing through the intersection. I'm very liberal when it comes to it. So, if I'm there 1 or 2 hours a week, maybe 5 or 6 a month, ticket-wise and
You're
stuff like that.
ticketing them.
Yeah, stops 10 or 15, but again, I'm very big on, and we have a way to track this. Whenever I issue you a written warning, it's in our database. Any police officer in the state of Maryland can see that Sergeant Pratt wrote you a warning and where it was. I'm very big on, you might get that one talking to or the one warning from me, and when you do it again, then maybe you'll get a ticket. It depends, but we have different ways of sort of tracking who our recidivists are. And again, just you live here, we'll keep it safe. Go ahead.
Okay, well, you're probably going to ticket me, and so I'll tell you right now, please do. I would much rather you do that. We're frankly tired of even our neighbors. In particular, this big guy and
I see him sitting on the corner all the time.
we almost got clotheslined by a neighbor 2 houses down from us, who then insulted us for protesting. So please, ticket us.
We certainly will. And that's what we don't want. That's what we want to avoid that type.
Okay?
And I guess it goes along with what you're going to discuss with sidewalks and everything too. So. But I need to reiterate, this has got to be one of the safest communities that Maryland has to offer. It's great that I get to sit here and just say, hey, we have people running stop signs, because the other communities, I'm in charge of the district community action team where we just do street crimes, and I go into neighborhoods where they would love to say that a theft from auto and maybe an occasional burglary is on their things, because, obviously there's a lot worse, but What we say is just, I don't even want to say that. Okay. You know how to get in touch with us if you
A different question is, are solicitors required by Montgomery County to be licensed?
So it depends on what they are soliciting for. If they are soliciting for any type of monetary funds, donations, then yes. If they are political soliciting, anything where they don't ask for money, then no. Religious, all of that type of stuff. They do not need it. But if they ask for money in any way, shape, or form, magazines, if they're not for profit, there is some leeway. 90% of the people that we get the calls for, they are for the random person that lives in Delaware that's soliciting for an energy company that wants your money now, or magazines or something. They need to have a proper county permit. It's not just they have to have their ID displayed, but they need to have a permit, and they can only go from sunset to sundown and everything like that. We always ask residents to call. You know who's legitimate and who's not.
Right.
So trust your instincts. Okay?
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for coming.
I'll be out here until 8, so.
Good night.
Thanks again. So, before we open it for comments, I wanted Keith to give us our weather report.
Well, there might be issues here tonight, but not with the weather. Because I'm guaranteeing 60s and 70s for the rest of this month, going right into March.
Whoa.
And I think old man Winter, this was his last gasp today. His final pulse was today. So I'm going to play coroner and officially pronounce him dead. But that's what, we talked about this last fall now.
Right. Thanks, Keith.
I told Matt, no plowing this winter.
Save your money.
That's right.
It's on the record.
Thank you. We're going to open it for comments, but for comments other than sidewalks first. And then if anyone has any comments to make other than sidewalk. And then for sidewalk, would you please identify yourself and start out by saying whether you're in favor or not in favor and why. And Matt's going to write down the reasons why people aren't in favor and are in favor, so we sort of keep track of who's saying what.
Actually, can you do it over there so we can see it?
I guess I also wanted to just maybe start us off by where makes the most sense.
You want to pass around the microphone?
You by the water cooler?
Yeah.
That way we can see it too.
Right, is this thing on?
Sorry,
We're done, yes.
Yeah, right, we're done.
I don't think this is on.
Right. And also, I'm sorry, go ahead, Matt, and explain.
I was just going to say that the email that we sent out may have been may have focused the discussion a little more than what was originally intended. So, at least in my mind, the discussion was going to be sort of a broader question of whether or not we want to pursue sidewalks or some other measure of safety for pedestrians in the north side of the village, just generally speaking. And then we do have the copies of this idea on the southern end of Delafield Street that we put together as sort of, that would act as kind of one possibility as sort of a phase one to put that in. And the reason that Delafield was selected is because if you have one handy or are looking at it, we kind of did cross marks on the area where there already is sidewalk in place on part of Delafield. So about a third of the street already has sidewalk, and there are very few trees that would be impacted by putting in sidewalks on the south end of Delafield. The only real exceptions to those are those two areas where you can see it sort of bumps out 5 feet. So we worked with the arborist and our tree supervisor, both looked over the area and determined that bumping it out 5 feet would protect the tree roots in that area and still maintain a wide enough street that cars could still pass through.
By bumping it out, you're kind of bumping out where the sidewalk would be?
Yeah.
Narrowing the lanes for traffic.
So you would actually narrow the street?
Yes.
Yeah, so currently the street is 25 feet wide, and so it would be 20 feet.
So you would,
It's already very hard to get through there when there's cars parked on both sides of the street.
Well, they wouldn't-
So that was
I
why
understand
we,
what you propose. I understand you're going to have a discussion later, but you're actually proposing narrowing a street that people have complained is too narrow already.
and putting in no parking on that side of the street as well.
Oh, so in front of my house, we couldn't park?
Do you live on the
Yeah.
east
Yes.
side? Okay, then yes.
We have a car that our daughter parks there, for safety. She comes home at night and we would like her to be able to.
Okay, are we going to do the non-sidewalks first?
Yes.
I just want to understand the
Right.
proposal.
Yeah, okay. Non-sidewalks first.
Yep. No, there were no comments.
Oh,
so
there
we
were no
moved on.
comments.
Right. Okay, so let the discussion begin. Yes, Lauren.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I live on the dead end part of Dellfield, and I wanted to open this conversation by saying I think it matters that we talk about this as a safety issue and not a sidewalk issue, and try and work together to try and find solutions that are not going to put anybody out in the neighborhood. I think this clearly is a thought that came up. I initially I think brought some of this conversation because on dead end Dellfield with small children, we're basically cut off from all of the neighborhood amenities. Our kids are not able to walk anywhere in a way that I feel comfortable. As you all know, as we've just heard, and as we all, we know, people are whipping down Thornapple Street. I mean, really, the conversation started with what can we do on Thornapple Street that's going to just make me feel safe with my kids walking through the neighborhood that I live in, being able to get to the store, being able to get to the park. I mean, we're cut off, and I don't know how it moved into a conversation of Dellfield, which obviously doesn't have the same sets of whipping down the street issues that Thornapple does. Yes,
This
but
wouldn't even put sidewalks
no,
on Thornapple.
exactly. So I mean, I do want to just, I sort of feel like this proposal takes us a bit down a potentially sort of angry place with each other when I think we all want to find solutions that can be helpful for problems that we have. And nobody's trying to take down trees. Nobody wants
Some people don't want to find
create
solutions.
problems for each other. But I do think that there's a real safety issue that we have up in this area of Thornapple. So I guess I don't want to question your process on here. I guess I'm just a little concerned that unless this is a for or against this proposal, I wonder if it might be beneficial for us to just have a broader
Discussion.
conversation about looking for solutions that are going to meet everybody's needs.
Well,
Yeah.
would slowing down traffic on Thornapple, if we speed bumps
I mean, that would help immensely.
and making it one way?
One way.
Well, I had questions about one way because, so if you made it one way, wouldn't that just cause more people to be driving down the side streets on
Right, you'd have to be-
Chestnut?
make a
And
U-turn
also,
on
it would just redirect more traffic onto Summit and Taylor.
I think so.
But that was just my thought, but
Just as a historical point of reference, about 20.
Would you identify yourself, please?
Charles Adams, I live on Summit Avenue.
Thank you.
About 25 years ago, when Summit was the primary come-through route, people would come up from the park, and because Summit is a little wider, they would go at a fairly high rate of speed on Summit, and we had no stop signs at Taylor at that point. They'd
Right.
take the corner and they'd go on out. And we fought the battle on Summit Avenue for speed bumps. The primary argument against the speed bumps, and also by taking any road and turning it one way, is that when the fire department or the ambulances come, they have certain predefined routes that they use that allow them to get to where they need to go. So there is a separate issue if you're going to change directions, which I don't have any objection to. You need to clear that with the fire department, the police, and the EMS so that they know they don't get lost back here. That was the one issue. The other issues were kind of irrelevant. I wouldn't say the speed bumps reduced the cut-through after a traffic study where they spent some time counting cars and everything, but it sure did slow down the traffic.
Marty?
Lori
Marty Langland, Chestnut Street, longtime resident of the North End. And I'm going to back up Lauren here because I think the really urgent need here is for some kind of safety improvements on Thornapple, not on Delafield. I mean, Delafield didn't even occur to me until I saw the plat here. Thornapple is dangerous. When I wasn't on crutches in the wheelchair, I walked my dog on Thornapple all the time. And I had come this close to being hit at night on Thornapple by people doing 40 miles an hour or more and ignoring stop signs, etc. I would like the council to really focus on sidewalks on Thornapple. And wherever sidewalks come in, I would like to ask you to do two favors for those of us who are garden club and ecologically minded. Number one, you've already done. Spare the trees. There is nothing wrong with a sidewalk that curves graciously around a tree. And number two, maybe this should be number one, please, please, please pave the sidewalks with water permeable material to control storm runoff. And because on Thornapple especially, all that water from Thornapple goes right down to the ravine and into Rock Creek and into the bay. And the more we can use permeable paving materials for sidewalks, the more we control runoff. So I would ask you to make any sidewalk that you consider anywhere, Thornapple being a priority, but on any street, to please pave now with the new permeable paving materials that are very good and very available and not even very expensive.
Is the new walks on Brookville, are those permeable?
Yes. Those are permeable, and the driveway that the Novaks put in, for example, at the corner of Chestnut and Thornapple, that's permeable paving, and it's very doable now. It's much less expensive than it was 10 years ago. Please, save the trees, do permeable paving, and focus on Thornapple. Thank you.
Yes.
My name is Mark Schumann. I live at the corner of Delafield and Thornapple. So sort of at the epicenter of what I consider to be the danger zone. I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. They're not permitted under any circumstances to walk outside of our gate. It is a firm rule in our house. We lived in the neighborhood for 7 years. Now that they're older and they recognize it, it's pretty much gospel. I don't understand. I never contemplated coming to a meeting hearing about sidewalks on Delphish. I could walk in the middle of the road and be completely safe. This to me seems somewhat misguided, or maybe, I don't know, got the wrong impression. Thornapple Street is a danger zone. And it's not actually, in my opinion, I've watched traffic now for 7 years. I raised this issue with Gene Sperling many years ago. It's neighbors that speed in our neighborhood. It isn't outside. I can tell you the list of people who speed. I know who they are. Right?
Do you take names?
I'm the guy that steps in the middle of the road. It might be cut through traffic. It might be people leaving work. That all might be true too. Slow down the traffic. It's a shame. It's an absolute shame that now 7 years later I'm still at a meeting and we haven't done anything about it. I've offered to pay for the speed bumps. No one wants to do it. Shame on you. Shame on you guys. Sorry. Not you guys, but shame on the institution.
Right.
So that's my thought. Slow it down.
Larry?
Yeah, Larry Watson, Delafield. I'd like to make a motion that this gentleman pay for...
I second that. All in favor?
No, it's really not a big deal, guys. It's not that expensive. Sorry to tell you.
I agree that we just had a police officer here. We pay for his time. He obviously has to follow the rules that he's instructed by his police department, but if we made it clear to him that we want him to vigorously and aggressively ticket, and that the times we pay for are these rush hour times, this would have a significant improvement on this. The addition of the properly designed speed bumps would be excellent. And I am absolutely against sidewalks for numerous reasons, but I think this is an excellent approach. If it doesn't work, it is going to slow things down. It will improve the safety in the neighborhood, and then, if necessary, we'll relook at sidewalks.
Right. Larry, can I ask a question? What are some of the numerous reasons?
Well, what's the distance from the curb that you have to? How much green space do you need before you start the sidewalk?
I don't know.
It's
You
3 to 4 feet.
mean right of way, public right of way?
Well, you come off your roadway. You got your curb. You have to come in 3 to 4 feet before you can put the sidewalk down.
I don't think
I
that's
don't,
right.
yeah.
So, and if you look at your drawings, it's exactly what you're showing. So these things are coming in a considerable distance. It's not true. Into the right. Yes, it is true. Look at it. You can see your curve there as well.
Yeah. Okay. We can't argue.
No, I want to hear specific
I
reasons.
understand. I actually know the code on the right-of-way sidewalks.
So you're, sir, let me, if I can rephrase, one objection of the numerous ones is that too much of the public right-of-way would be encroached on by sidewalks.
That's number one. Number two, I'm on the corner. Guess where the plow dumps the snow? Guess who gets to shovel the snow that's dumped off the sidewalk that you've installed? No, thank you.
Okay. Number two, snow shoveling.
Well, not just a little snow shoveling.
Right. Okay. Yes, go ahead.
Larry's neighbor to the other, and my wife is here as well. A couple of things. First of all, I've not heard anyone yet suggest that it'll solve any existing safety concern to put sidewalks on Delfield Street. So we've heard, so this is a solution to a problem that apparently doesn't exist. There is a problem, but this is not a solution.
Okay, but that isn't entirely fair because there were people initially who said,
Let me just get the historical reason why this particular plan came up, is that when our traffic engineers and others were looking around, they saw here was a street that had sidewalks on half of or part of it, not on the other. There seemed to be a pretty clear line. And it was a trial sketch. It wasn't anything particular about Delfield. It's a trial sketch.
Okay, but it's a trial sketch that solves no problem that anyone I've heard.
Right, but initially, just so you know, that there were concerns about the kids having to walk down the streets, not on sidewalks, on Delfield.
Okay.
I'm not hearing that tonight. What we're hearing is solve Thornapple.
That's correct. So that's one thing. The second thing is the proposal I heard would actually, I think, make Delfield a more dangerous street to drive on, because you're taking what's already a narrow street where people park and make it 20 feet as opposed to 25, and probably take away my family's ability to park in front of our house. So those are two additional things I'd like to know. That you take away my parking, you would make a street that's already narrow, I would assume not up to code is built today, and made more narrow.
Right.
So those seem to be substantial, and as I said, there may be real problems, and I certainly respect the fact that Warren came here, has a problem, and said this doesn't actually fix it. And so that strikes me as very important. You have people who are coming to you saying, we have a problem, saying this is not a solution for it. Let's try to figure out a solution.
Right.
So I agree entirely.
Okay, but I think that it's changed.
One food for thought, though, is that if it were just on Thornapple, and as I was trying,
I'm not actually arguing for sidewalks. Let me just be clear. I'm not arguing for sidewalks on Thornapple. I'm arguing to address the speed on Thornapple. I'm not sure sidewalks are an answer for anybody where streets are already so narrow.
Sure. So just to be clear, though, the reason, and a part of the reason that this was looked at, it was also as sort of a step one to somehow connect the north end to the lower system of sidewalks. If there were only sidewalks on Thornapple, for instance, kids would have to cross Brookville Road twice to get to the market. So if we were looking at
They'd take, they do what we do, which is that we all feel safe once we're on Chestnut or Delfield. You put your kids in the middle of the street, you kind of run to make sure you can see over the thing because they're up ahead of you, and you're hoping nobody's racing up Chestnut and you're going to hit them at the top of the hill, which scares me a lot. But you know, they're safer in the middle of the road on Chestnut. It's like Thornapple, I can't help.
And as I was trying to say, nobody's married to this idea, so I definitely appreciate.
You understand? Put the idea that apparently takes away the parking spot from my house, threatens the tree, threatens the driveway that we have in front of my house.
So how many people would support Thornapple being one way? as opposed...
To answer that, my only concern about that is how that would affect actually traffic flow, because everyone's going to have to make a essentially U-turn and come around the side streets.
Well, it'll increase traffic on Summit to Summit.
Would you consider the speed bumps and having the policemen there giving out tickets?
And maybe lowering
Getting to that
put a
step
15-mile-an-hour speed limit and enforce it.
Lauren? I'm saying.
I think one issue with the one-way is that it would affect the bus route, which is something that would have to be thought of, because right now the bus comes up Thornapple the opposite direction from what you're proposing.
From Summit
Correct.
down to Brookville.
That's right. So that's just one thing to consider in that proposal. I'm not saying that's a deal breaker. It would be less convenient for me for my kids, but I could eat that if that was the solution.
What I think is remarkable is that there's, as far as I'm hearing, there's no one here who's supporting this.
So
Right.
what is that?
That's correct.
This is the proposal that was put on the table that would put sidewalks on both.
It was a conversation starter.
Right.
Is there no
We didn't just pull that out of our butt. I just want you to know that. It was...
It's all to come out on a Thursday night and say, we don't like this.
Right,
But all I
perfect.
want you to note is that there's no one here supporting this.
And we're hearing a lot of support for speed bumps on Thornapple, but the other question is the one-way, and you're saying don't.
Well, why don't we do it in
I think it takes a little more.
We need a
police
traffic.
giving out
review with
tickets,
that.
why don't you put the speed bumps in and see what happens?
Okay.
Frank?
Yes. Pat?
Pat Pendergast on Thornapple Street. Now, yeah, I'm opposed to Thornapple Street sidewalks.
Why?
I'll tell you this
Why?
morning, I walked my son to the bus, walking down the yards like I always do, and he walks home down the yards like he always does. It's the exact same spot you would put a sidewalk, so I don't know why people can't just walk down the yards.
Carriages, baby carriages, strollers.
You could still do that without much problem going down the side of the road. I've lived there 16, 17 years. I've never had a problem going up and down, even when he had to go to the further
I respectfully
bus stop.
disagree with that as somebody who's
It's
pushed
me
the
talking
stroller
right
through
now,
this
thank
neighborhood.
you. I used to push the stroller up and down the street also for my kid when he was younger.
But I mean, but you said, but strollers down the grassy areas is less convenient.
It's not a good situation.
Okay.
So I don't think it's necessary because you can walk down the yards like you can for all that. And that.
Well, let me say, they're not yards, it's the public right-of-way that faces people's yards. So just to make sure that you're not going on private property when you're doing that.
Sidewalks on Turner.
I got that. So, but that, then that argument about strollers would also mean that you should probably put sidewalks on every part of North End.
Right.
Because that would make it safe.
Yeah.
So if you're saying that this one rule about strollers might not apply to Thornapple, then I would like to apply that to every single street in the North End.
Okay.
And pave the crap out of it. Secondly, the other thing is about the one-way thing. You're making conjectures about increasing traffic on Summit and whatnot without actually studying the problem.
Right.
And if the problem is a safety issue on the number of cars going back and forth on Thornapple, then that would help address that problem. It may increase it a bit on Summit. I don't know. It certainly reduces it on some way. Some people may decide not to go around at all because they don't want to go in the speed bumps. They may turn right, which I see them do, and then go left down Dalefield to avoid the speed bumps.
Or use Leland.
Yeah, so you might actually
Which we'd
decrease
like.
the amount of cut-through traffic because they'll go down Leland or Woodbine or what have you, and then it becomes a rolling wood problem.
Right.
So we can push it over to the next neighborhood. I don't have a problem with that. But it would also make it easier for people who have to walk down Thornapple. If you only have traffic coming one way, you can certainly walk down the road, push your stroller down the road without having to worry about getting hit from behind all the time. The one other thing is when I was this morning at the bus stop, I looked at what is the proposed area for the sidewalk in Thornapple. And in this case, you would tear out that entire privacy hedge that the person has there. That's all gone. So then I looked up the street and saw the number of trees that you would have to tear out, the telephone poles that would be moved.
This, on which street is it? This is on Thornapple, right. Yeah.
That's just where I was walking today.
Right.
And you would move the water meters would have to move. There's a couple gas maintenance things. All that would have to move. And when I looked at it and took this $40,000 and back in the envelope, it would cost you $500,000 to do sidewalks on the North End, which I would much rather put into having a cop drive around far more than 5 hours a week that you have doing far more. That would buy hundreds of hours of police patrol to solve all kinds of other problems besides just someone walking one half block up Thornapple.
So Matt, costs is an issue here.
Okay, Frank?
Costs are not needed.
I'm Frank Correll. I live on Turner Lane, and
I want to go back to the point that was made by the original speaker about what we're talking about here is an issue of safety for pedestrians. And I don't want to get into the question of whether speed bumps do the trick. There are several stop signs on Thornapple Street that do not prevent irresponsible driving. What I am concerned about is, and I personally have experience because I walk in that area 2-3 times a week at least with a dog, is that the question here seems to be kind of defined the wrong way. I completely agree that the question is safety first and foremost. That's not to say that Thornapple Street is the only safety problem we have for pedestrians in the north end of the village. And I speak from experience of several years, and I'm sure will be backed up by people who live there and who actually have to do this. Thornapple Street is a clear and present danger. It's priority number one by any reasonable examination of the case. I would say that probably your second priority should be Summit and to some extent Delafield and Chestnut and Delafield are wider. One can protect oneself behind cars more easily if one's walking down and somebody comes down the road at an excessive speed or even takes you by surprise. I fortunately have never had to walk a stroller up and down any of those streets. I wouldn't care to do it, and I most sincerely sympathize with the people who do. And it seems to me also you've got two other problems. Number one, who basically controls the right-of-way in this village? You have told us per Section 7-209 of the ordinances about all the things we would have to do if we wanted to do something with regard to that right-of-way, whatever that may be. Now, I realize that the north end of the village was developed differently from this other end of the village, and obviously the problems are going to be more considerable. But in the last analysis, it's the village that controls the right-of-way, and with that control, for which sometimes you say you'll issue a revocable license for $100 if somebody encroaches by 6 inches with some kind of a wall or what have you, also carries with it a certain liability, I think, because if you are that careful in protecting your right to the right of way to the extent that you have revocable licenses and considerable cost for doing this, it seems to me that you're also assuming a liability, either stated or implied, for keeping the right of way throughout the entire village safe, and I ask you to consider. And thirdly, I can see a very serious problem, and it needs to be addressed. What one does with regard to the north end of the village and dealing with a configuration that looks considerably different from the rest of the village. Seems to me, number one, if you're going to look at this subject seriously, you've got to establish and stick with those priorities. And then once
you see this, it seems to me you must address the question of feasibility. Can you do it or can't you? Now, I have to apologize for my old age and my bad eyesight. I couldn't see the thing that came on the computer. I have enough trouble reading ordinary print, leave alone stuff like this, and I didn't acquaint myself with the details here. And after hearing some of this discussion, I hope everybody will understand that, yes, I'm very strongly in favor of sidewalks on Thornapple Street. I'm also in favor of looking at the question of extending the sidewalk on Delafield Street. I realize it can be done, and perhaps Chestnut and Summit should also be looked at. Summit being, I think, the most serious of the three. And I think it's a question of technical feasibility, of timing, and then when you see what you've got, take a look at what the cost is and see what you can do. But never ever forget that we're talking about the safety of families, of people, even of a dog walker. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Oh, one yes, and that is, I think, making Thornapple Street one-way for reasons given from the point of view of traffic flow and what have you. It's a very bad idea. It just tends to increase encouragement of being an irresponsible driver because you know there's nothing big coming at you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's the point.
Lauren?
Thank you for your comments, and I mean, I won't hide that I'm someone who, I like having sidewalks in a neighborhood that I live in. I like living in a walkable neighborhood. I also, as I said before, understand that there's lots of interests, and, you know, I think safety is the primary thing. I would like to echo, and it's something that I've been thinking about a lot in terms of the liability. You know, a lot of this, we started a conversation over the summer. You know, we had taken a basketball hoop that belonged to a neighbor, and we pulled it, you know, into the right of way, and we were playing basketball on it, and I got a warning from the neighborhood saying, you can't have that. And I said, I don't understand. What do you mean I can't have a basketball hoop in this neighborhood? And I was told that the village does not feel comfortable having things in the right of way that force people into the street because they see that to be a liability. And to me, this seems like the village is choosing to use the right of way in a way that forces people into the street. And I think that it is something that the village should strongly consider. God forbid something were to happen.
It has happened, I think, in the past. Wasn't somebody hit on Thornapple Street and they were walking a long time ago? Didn't you play that long?
There's a lot of near misses. There's a lot. I mean, and I think any of us who live on that street and have turned down that street at night have almost hit a dog walker. I mean, it happens very frequently. People are in the middle of the street.
Does anybody have anything new to add to what's been said?
To pass Thornapple.
Yes.
I just have a question.
Pardon?
I just have a question.
Sure.
What is your process for considering these issues going forward?
This is it.
Well, what we are going to do, the first thing we would do is talk to our traffic engineer about the feasibility of putting speed bumps. I mean, what I'm hearing is that we'll put speed bumps if that's feasible.
Or other slowing mechanisms.
Right.
He has other ideas for these sorts of things.
On Thornapple, and see whether that addresses part of the problem. But there is still sort of a mixed message here about whether or not sidewalks need to be put on the north side. I mean, I hear, you know, some of you saying no sidewalks, but I'm also hearing that there are safety issues to be considered, and sidewalks would address some of those safety issues.
You also make sure that the one-way piece is, I think, important. I mean,
well, and we'll explore that.
Explore that.
Taylor has made one way to reduce traffic on Taylor, and in conjunction with looking at making Thornapple one way, why don't we look at making Taylor two-way? Because Taylor is the exact same width as Thornapple.
Right.
And whatever reasons they had to make Taylor one way should also apply to Thornapple. for those of you that...
Okay, and that will all be, the questions would be one way, and what would happen to traffic flow.
And before you blow 500 grand on sidewalks, why don't you look at some speed bumps and one way? You could take out speed bumps on one way with a bulldozer.
Okay.
And then, easier than you can remove sidewalks that we decided to do.
Okay, but just so you understand, Pat, that there are also people who are saying sidewalks do provide safety. And so...
We're looking at
right. We're starting with Thornapple, right.
And safety issues.
Right.
The least expensive option would be one way to look at that, and what the impact is that.
Right.
Then speed bumps, and then sidewalks. So quick, you could have one way in a day. You could be one way.
I appreciate your ideas on that. Thanks. Did John have a question too?
John Sherr, I've lived on Chestnut Street probably about 35 years. I walk my dog frequently on Chestnut, Taylor, whatever. I have to agree that Thornapple traffic does move, and I do walk in that direction. Okay. I think speed bumps would probably help slow the traffic down. Also, I can remember where we had a stop sign on Chestnut Street in the middle of the street at the top of the hill, and your engineers had it taken down, if you recall, some years ago. And that did slow the traffic significantly on Chestnut Street because people, either they did tend to slow down significantly on Chestnut Street. But one of the other issues I think is that the houses on Chestnut Street, Thornapple, Delfield, all that, are well established. And when you start cutting them into the vegetation and do the setbacks and stuff and all that, I just think it would ruin the character.
How do you describe the character?
Pardon me?
How would you describe the character?
The character that Marty, for instance, Marty's house right there, she has a conservation for rabbits and a lot of wildlife. I mean, seriously, if we see deer on Chestnut, we see tons of rabbits and so forth. But I think, no matter what side of the street you go on, there's a number of houses that I think, have invested an awful lot of money in plantings. Unfortunately, they are in the right of way. I just think it would be a real tragedy to ruin the atmosphere and the character of some of the streets.
The character being more wild, rural?
Well, I'm not saying that necessarily wild and rural, but I'm just saying that people invest
not
a
suburban.
lot of time and energy and money into perfecting your yards, and they spend a lot of money on upkeep, and to change that character, I think would be demoralizing to some people, especially to me.
Thank you.
And I think you guys should come look at it. I've said this, I've been to the last 4 meetings. Go up to the north end, walk around, look at that in the house next to me that's being constructed.
Larry.
The point I was thinking about last summer when I walked down the street here, and I was surprised at there's sidewalks there, and I was surprised at the number of carriages, baby carriages, that were in the street there. And the kids play in that street. Which street? So this one right here.
Taylor.
It's dead end.
Oh, Turner.
Dead. The street every night.
And there is this is a tough street to drive up and down and get out of the way of stuff, and yet people still do it. When we were
in the street or in their driveway? Because I live on Turner, and I have kids, and my kids never play in the street.
Right here, the street right here.
They play in their driveway at their basketball hoop, those two boys.
I didn't say anything about whether they were playing that. They run up and down the street. They don't run up and down the sidewalk. Okay, and that's a consistent fact. In time and again, part of this problem is there is a right-of-way that has grass. And right now, there is a privacy hedge that's in that right-of-way that the village hasn't made anyone clear away so someone could walk in that space as grass, which may have gone a long way to solving part of this safety problem. And finally, I keep asking if you would directly address utilizing this our police officer, to actually aggressively give out tickets.
At rush hour.
Don't park at the stop sign.
And for some reason and I think it's a very powerful tool. Why aren't we using it?
Right. I didn't realize until he was talking tonight that he said, well, I'm pretty liberal about it. And so we can, in fact, give him the message that the people at this meeting, even though they themselves might be ticketed, want him to not be liberal, and that there should be ticketing.
And park discreetly. Because he really does park right across from Larry's house, so you would see him.
Yeah. Okay, and to park discreetly.
You're not going to be stupid to go right by that stop.
Okay.
I'm going to give him coffee, so.
Okay.
Tell him it is driving.
Okay. Is there anything else new to say? Because it's already 20 after, and we have a lot of other business to cover tonight.
I just want to quickly add that I fully support.
Your name?
Alyssa Bean.
Okay.
I fully support sidewalks on Thornapple specifically. I didn't hear anybody, I came in late, but just the fact that so many of the neighborhood kids are walking on their own from 3rd grade on to Chevy Chase Elementary. Many of those kids, my own children's friends, coming from the north end. And I just, to me, bottom line is like safety is like just trumps people's plants that they put in the right of way. I mean, it's the only street, as far as I know, in Martin's Addition that runs perpendicular to Brookville that doesn't have a sidewalk. It just makes no sense to me that anybody who even lives on that street wouldn't want it for their own safety coming to and from their own driveway. I now live on a street with a sidewalk. I used to live on a street without a sidewalk. I much prefer to live on a street with a sidewalk, so.
Okay, new information.
That is a inaccurate characterization of what happens, because if you live on Thornapple Street, if you actually live on Thornapple, and you want to go perpendicular to Brookville, it's not even the best way to go from a route perspective. So I just want to make sure that sidewalks, it really is killing a squirrel with a bazooka. You don't need to do it.
Why is that?
Because it's not the most practical approach.
What's a more practical approach?
So I can tell you, from living again in the epicenter of the danger zone, coming off of Brookville onto Thornapple is a downhill trajectory, right? So you pick up a lot of speed, and then you don't stop. Then you roll right through, past Chestnut, and then onto Delafield. So when I looked at this many years ago, temporary speed bumps are not a huge expense. They're rubber, they're removable, and they're very, where you put them, a traffic engineer can tell you.
Right. We've gone there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that will help you understand. Then maybe there's some permanency. So take it incrementally. That's the key.
Right.
You will address safety through that.
Okay. Okay. These last two, Marge.
Marge Wasson on Delafield Street, also the epicenter. And I, to the point of sidewalks as a concept versus safety as a concept, I think let's remember that if we're looking at routes from the north end to other parts of the village, it means crossing Thornapple to do that. And so slowing down the traffic on Thornapple is what you need to do, and controlling it and controlling those stop signs is what you need to do to create a safe access and egress from the north end to other parts of the village. And so that's where the focus will provide a very important aspect of safety.
Thank you. Lynn?
Lynn King, 3409 Thornapple, and I strongly oppose sidewalks on Thornapple for all of the reasons.
No, don't say all of them. What are they? Be specific.
I don't think it's going to solve your problem. I've got an 11-year-old who walks home from Chevy Chase Elementary School regularly. We haven't had an incident. My son used to play street hockey with Carol Edelstein's son in the street at the top of Thornapple without incident.
So you're saying that safety is not an issue?
I don't see safety as the issue.
Okay.
I just don't see it. Yes, people blow through the stop sign and they gun up the hill. But, if you have responsible kids and you have responsible parents monitoring those kids, it's not going to be a situation. I see dog walkers, they have the vests on, and they're, it goes two ways. Safety goes two ways. And if you're going to be out in the middle of the night walking your dog, common sense would dictate that you're not wearing all black. People now wear vests and things of that nature so that you can see it. I just don't see the safety that people are indicating of the sidewalks as being a real solution.
Okay. And so that Okay.
We're done.
Nothing.
We're done.
Okay,
We're
Matt.
moving
Safety is not
on.
an
We're
issue.
going on to the regular agenda. You are welcome to come back for next meeting and see where we are on all of this. Our hope would be that we can get the traffic engineer to look at Thornapple, look at speed bumps, look at one-way, and come back to us with a recommendation. And we will share that with you.
Let me just, well, Richard mentions that. In the past, our traffic engineer has suggested some other devices other than speed bumps, like narrowings of the street that forces you to slow down, chicanes that forces you to move in not a straight line. There are various ways to slow down traffic. Speed bumps is just one of them. So he's come up with some of these in the past that we have. This is a perennial issue. Okay.
If you put these, you know how you projected stuff out, those two areas, those two, in front of your house and the next one down, you stuck that stuff out as if it was going to slow stuff down. With our narrow streets, you realize that you're not just losing the parking space right there, but you're literally preventing your school buses and your garbage trucks and the emergency stuff from moving on either side of it.
Right.
You would literally lose 5 car spaces for each one of those.
Okay, we've got it. Thank you. I appreciate all your comments. We have to keep moving, and we'd love for you to stay and hear the rest of the meeting.
John, I will leave you with one thought. Can't get something for nothing.
Yeah. So we're going to move on to election committee update. Marty. So I guess this is the only business worth staying for.
I thought the next issue was repairing the roads. Which you can do when you put speed bumps on.
Right.
Springtime.
When are you going to repair the roads out here on Taylor?
In the spring. In the spring.
It's actually scheduled.
It's actually scheduled, yes.
That would slow the traffic.
Right. Thanks, John. Marty, go ahead with your report, please. Would you people please be quiet? We have a meeting going on.
Sorry, I'm speaking to my neighbor.
Well, take it to the hall. Okay, Marty.
Thank you for the gavel, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
Sorry.
Not a problem. I'm Marty Langman. I think most of you probably know my name. I have the honor this year of being chair of the elections committee, which is kind of fun. I think a clean election matters a lot to all of us, certainly me. And I have a copy of our election committee report that I can share with the council. I didn't bring copies for everybody. Thank you. Okay. We met at the village office here on Monday, February 6th. All 5 of us were here. Nice to have a committee that shows up. And Richard and Matt and Beth also came, which was very helpful. The committee confirmed our election schedule for the village of Martin Station's election for 2017. Sunday, March 12th, will open the nominations period. It's a 1-month period according to our regulations. Tuesday, April 11th is the last day to submit nominations. People can nominate their neighbors. There will be a candidate's forum.
And themselves.
Or themselves, yes. Themselves or their neighbors. We're very happy to have nominations. It's an easy process. There will be a candidate's forum once we have nominations come in, and we'll send a nominations and elections packet out to everyone. The actual election is on Thursday, May 11th this year. And we'll have the celebration on the sidewalk. I want to publicly recognize Beth Boa for her wonderful help with the celebration last year, which I thought was really fun. And that was my first year on the election committee, so I got to see the inner workings, and it was a lot of work, so Beth, thank you especially for that. We reviewed the nominations invitation we'll send out this year, looked at last year's. We decided to do door-to-door distribution, because just putting it on constant comment or constant contact or in the village newsletter doesn't always reach people as much, and we really want to have more candidates than we have slots. There are 2 slots open for election this cycle, and last time we had 3 slots open and 3 candidates. We invited candidates repeatedly to step up. only 3 did. But we would like to have more candidates, and we realize it's kind of daunting to run for council, to run for anything, to run for junior high school class president. So we thought one way we could do that and maybe help involve some of the younger families, encourage people to participate, is to open the nominations period with a community open house. And we would like to have representatives from the council come and just be there to talk to people, and maybe 1 or 2 representatives from some of the committees or some longtime residents talk about what it feels like to serve. For me, it's been fun. It's been difficult at times to serve on the elections committee, first thing I've done here, but I've been here 32 years. It's the first thing I stepped up to do. But it's actually been a lot of fun. It's been interesting and informative and fun and satisfying to be able to do things well. So, one of our new members, Lauren, on the north end, offered very kindly to host the open house. The village will pay for a little bit of wine and cheese. It will be probably in the afternoon, 2 to 4 is what we're looking at on March 12th. And that will officially kick off our nominations month. And we hope that people will come. Kids are welcome, by the way. We want young families to participate more. And that the council members, all of you who can be available, will be there to tell people how it is, to look at issues. The next thing we did was look at the comments that residents had written in the village survey last fall. We've looked at them before, but this was the first chance we had for detailed discussion of them. Like, what can the committee do to provide more info on village issues before the election? Can the issue positions be clearer in the candidates' statements? Because each candidate submits a statement when they run. That's part of your election package. And we can do all of that. In addition to the candidates forum, we can, in the candidate statements, ask the candidates to address issues like sidewalks, right, or safety on Thornapple, or any other issues that the community would like us to ask them to address. And so we'll do that, and we'll have the open candidates forum in late April, early May. And we would like to hear, about what issues you would like the candidates to address this year, right? And of course, obviously, we'd like to have candidates run, so it's a great way to be involved. Anyway, March 12th, Sunday, March 12th, at Lauren Beal's house. We'll send out the invitation. We'll actually walk it door to door. And we're also very interested in looking at civics education for youngsters. And one of the things we're thinking about doing is working with the basically 8 to 12-year-olds in our village, or maybe 8 to 10-year-olds, to help walk the announcements around and make sure they know they can come to the forum. Because I think we're all reacting to the national election, and we think that young voters need to get into the habit of civic involvement early. And this is an opportunity for us to do that here at home.
You can do it.
So we've been thinking of having some fun with this committee. And there will be wine for the grown-ups. Anyway, we would like to, you'll probably hear from us about, asking you to tell us, what issues would you like candidates to address in their statements this year. And at the candidates forum, you can ask any question you want about anything at all. That's completely open. We also had one of the questions on the survey was about students, college students, doing absentee ballots. And another question that came up in the survey comments was about absentee ballots in general. Let me answer the general one first. There was a suggestion from 1 or 2 commenters that there were enough absentee ballots to have swung the election results in the last 2 elections, 2015. That's actually not true. And I can tell you, as a member of the Elections Committee, that not all the absentee ballots were voting for the same candidates. So even if they'd all been one-sided, they still would not have affected the outcome. There just weren't enough of them to do that. And we are very careful in terms of our security controls on absentee ballots. In terms of college students using absentee ballots, our current regulations provide that that's the student's legal residence, that they're entitled to vote. We have no basis to tell them not to vote. And again, we want to encourage young voters in civic participation. But there's a recent court case on that question about college student voting. So we've asked Richard to ask our attorney for an opinion reflecting on that. Do we need to revise Martin's Additions regs in terms of college students voting here? As it stands, college students are fully entitled to vote. If their driver's license has their Martin's Additions address, they're on our voting rolls and they have the right to vote. But that's where we are now. We'll see if that changes.
And I just want to say that Ron has answered that question, and it is my sitting on it that it hasn't gone out to you.
Duly noted. And thank you for voting
so don't blame Ron.
Okay. We'll get back to all of that. Steve Trowan, who's one of our committee members, and I agreed to draft a newsletter article addressing these various concerns that have come up with the comments that were given in the survey, because we want to be responsive to what people said. I would note that of the 117 residents who responded about the election on the survey, 90% said they thought the 2016 election was fair and open. Made me feel good. And there were a number of very nice compliments about the improved election procedures that the council adopted at our recommendation in 2016. So we'll have the nominations open house invitation ready to go to the printer, Beth, by Saturday the 25th of February. We'll have it hopefully by Friday. And Natalie will get us a P.O. box so we have a secure place where you can mail your absentee ballots, secure the ballots. And our next meeting, to which you are all cordially invited, is at 6:30 p.m. on Monday, February 27th, here, and all residents are welcome to attend. And we adjourned on time at 9 o'clock. That is my committee report.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all of your committee.
They really are terrific.
They really are terrific.
Any questions? Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay. Action on the minutes. We had a bare quorum last month, and so...
So I move to approve the
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? Minutes are passed. Ordinance, possible introduction of an ordinance to amend the Code of Ordinances to require pre-permit consultation meeting for certain construction projects. Ron?
So at the last council meeting, the council discussed, at the urging of some residents, codifying the prior practice of requiring a pre-construction meeting to provide the non-binding forum for residents and village staff to discuss the construction project with the applicant. This ordinance, as drafted, would require a pre-permit application with a preliminary plan, just basic sketches to be presented before final plans are submitted for a permit, and the pre-construction meeting would be held based on that preliminary plan. The meeting would be mandatory. That is, the applicant must attend the meeting, but the outcome of the meeting would be non-binding. It would be, again, an informal opportunity for residents to voice their concerns about the project, and because the plans are in a preliminary stage, if the applicant found any of those comments compelling, wouldn't be too far invested in the project to make edits. This is modeled after a practice in the town of Chevy Chase, but this is just meant really to get the discussion started.
Has that been pretty successful in the town? I'm sorry, that didn't mean.
I'm just curious if...
Yes, I think so.
If there's... Is it completely voluntary for the applicant to change any plans as a result of this meeting?
Yes.
It's non-binding.
So they could ignore all comments?
Yes, that's right.
Yes.
I mean, the plans only have to meet the county and village codes.
Now, the way this is written, probably the same as in the town, you said. It requires 10 days notice. So this would, at a minimum, extend the period of application and building by 10 days. Right? Is that right?
Well, perhaps a little more, depending on when the village can schedule the meeting.
Right, okay, right.
The meeting might not always be, exactly 10 days after an applicant submits a preliminary plan.
Right. And so at least a minimum of 10 days.
Correct.
It would extend a process. What about cost? Is there any increase of cost in preparing preliminary? I mean, these are preliminary in the sense we say these are preliminary, but they could be the final plans.
Correct.
So do you know if this would add cost to the process, or that would add time? Would it add cost?
Well, on our end, I mean, to have a meeting with our building administrator there and potentially our code.
So it would also increase our village costs to be present, and time and cost.
It could increase the cost of the resident whoever's making the construction project, because they may want to bring their architect.
Yeah, okay.
My understanding...
And have two sets of plans potentially.
Yeah, so my understanding of where we started with this was we wanted to compel builders to participate in a meeting with residents to explain things, to explain projects, timelines, etc. That we didn't have that currently in our code, nor was it a requirement of the permit applications. Is that, so we all agree with that? So my concern with any sort of pre-meeting, one, there's the cost, two, there's not, as Katja raised, people could come in, and if the building meets the code, it meets the code. We're not changing anything. And I worry about the perception of us having some sort of pre-meeting where someone could come in and say, here are my plans, they meet the code, everyone in the room is unhappy about it, but we're not doing anything.
Right.
So I would say if it is possible and there's not a legal reason to do it a different way, couldn't we administratively make as a requirement of getting the permit that a builder participate in a meeting, a public meeting with residents? It would happen the same way. The plans would be approved.
Would have been. If
they comply with everything, they would have been approved. And then there would be a meeting so that residents could hear about
this would be a post-approval meeting.
Post-approval meeting. Because I struggle to see, we're going to be putting ourselves between two residents, potentially, by having a pre-meeting.
It sets it up as if there's some say.
Right.
And I'm afraid that usually there wouldn't be, if it complies with the village.
Our previous practice had been, I've thought, was that after the building permits had been approved and the plans finalized, that we tried to have a meeting with the contractor and if the architect was there to hear from them what their plans were for, how long it was going to take, how they were going to go about it, and also for neighbors to express concern about parking issues, about dust, about additional traffic, and who would neighbors go to if there were, particular issues associated with the actual construction. Because I want us to stay away from this whole building.
One other possibility, and Doug, feel free to jump in, and Ron as well, but in Somerset, I believe they require an applicant to go to all of the abutting properties and present the plans and get their neighbors to sign off on it before they can actually submit. I don't know if that would be overly burdensome but it also might be a way to talk through any issues one-on-one, and then
what happens if a neighbor doesn't sign?
Yeah, if the neighbor doesn't sign off, then what?
Or if they don't live in the village permanently.
The town of Somerset actually holds hearings on permit applications.
No, thank you.
Oh.
And the requirement prior to the hearing is that you've delivered plans to each neighbor and gotten their signature.
Sally, we don't normally take comments during the meeting, but...
I just had a question. It used to be that all contiguous neighbors got a copy of the plan. Is that what was just said?
That still occurs now.
Okay.
There's no proposal to alter that.
Okay, so
to answer Tiffany's question, yes, that's certainly possible. It can be a condition of the permit that a meeting like that take place. And in fact, the town of Chevy Chase has two meetings. We got this first meeting with the neighbors, and you have a second meeting that Doug might call, a site management meeting, where the town does go over, where's the dumpster going to be located? What are you going to do with parking? Where are your materials going to be stored?
We have a pre-construction meeting. We also have it in the village too. That's usually with the contractors, the sediment control inspector, not with necessarily neighbors.
So they're doing the site management meeting already.
But not with the neighbors present. It's a sit down with the contractors, architects, Doug.
Right. So yeah, the reason I brought that up is you have the opportunity to maybe combine it to one meeting.
Okay.
But I don't
That
know,
could
but-
just be part of the presentation that we require them to do in the other meeting.
But Doug may say that would prejudice the efficiency of the site management meeting. I don't know.
Or have two things, one site management meeting, but also that information could be presented to neighbors. I think I'm agreeing with what I'm hearing from Katya and Tiffany, that not a pre-approval but a post-approval meeting would be desirable. Is that what you're suggesting?
Practice has been, is that correct?
Yeah,
that's been the past practice.
Right, which was the past practice.
And that the meeting isn't necessarily a meeting of the council, it is the village office hosting, it's a community meeting.
Right.
The builder comes in, explains what their timeline is, explains what their processes are, so that any resident who wants to come can come. And I think that would...
And a chance for residents to hear how the construction's going to go forward. And I think for residents always to present a concern about traffic, because it's traffic and parking that are huge, huge issues.
Right. And who the points of contact are, who do you call with a complaint?
Right.
So these have been issues in the past.
So what would that require here, Ron, in order to change this?
Well, if you just wanted to make it a condition of the permit, you could leave the code alone and just include it as a standard condition in your list of standard permit conditions. And prior to the commencement of construction, a consultation meeting shall be held.
Just part of the application, permit application process.
It raises a potential enforcement issue, because once you hand over a permit, the applicant's going to want to start. So you might still consider it as a pre-permit meeting. If the plans are ready to be approved, you could have the permit signed, but before Matt hands it over, you schedule the meeting and you give it to the applicant at the meeting.
But not as a condition. I mean, I just think the idea of opening the meeting for residents to take shots at the plan itself is, if it meets the code, that isn't what they're here to discuss.
Right.
That they're only here to discuss how it's going to happen.
They can discuss it. They can raise the issues, but they cannot have legally. They cannot have an impact.
Discussion conversation.
In conversation. Right.
Okay. So, and you're saying we could do that just by making it, putting it on the building permit of the things that are required as part of a building permit.
Yes, that's possible.
And
I think the best way to do it, however, thinking about this now, is we add just one sentence to the code that says pre-construction meeting prior to the issuance of a building permit, a pre-construction consultation meeting shall be held.
Well, why are we writing that into our code? We don't write all the other permit conditions into our code.
You had some reservations.
Well,
something went through his mind.
Just to improve enforceability.
I would
that's all I'd like to say.
So if a builder says, no, I don't want to do it,
then they don't get a permit.
Then putting in the code requires them to do it.
Could we hold the bond then?
Not if
Condition of the permit?
Well, what I'm concerned about is if it's a condition of the permit,
if you want
they've already got the permit in their hand,
So all we have is the
and
bond.
they could commence construction immediately.
But they just don't issue the
It
permit.
could be something as innocent as, well, we were just getting ready, and we were delivering our materials. We weren't really starting. And there's going to be all sorts of gray area if you hand over the permit.
But he's not handing over the permit until after the meeting.
Well, that's a question.
Right.
That's what he's suggesting.
And I'm saying we could put that in the code to make that crystal clear.
Right.
Before the permit's issued,
right.
This meeting is...
Do we have to make them wait 10 days? Because that seems like a long period.
I think that it's reasonable if we want a pre-construction meeting, that we have to at least have time to announce that. And my concern about putting it in the code is I was very surprised to hear that this had been dropped. That there was at some point a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, a decision made that it was a waste of time. But I think it's an important process, and I would put it in the code just so that it has to happen, that it isn't a judgment issue on whether or not you want to do it. You have to do it. And your concern is that it takes time.
Well, it takes time, and if it's pre-permit, then it takes money too. And then there's the whole, it will seem like residents will have an opportunity to comment
This
on
goes
the
back to your
plans.
original
Right.
question about.
I don't think he's arguing for pre-permit. I think he's arguing for post-permit.
Except that you can't get the permit
But until you have the meeting, so that becomes pre-permit.
So that's what I'm saying. The village office, the manager can say, you've met all the permit requirements except for the meeting. We schedule the meeting, you show up at the meeting, once the meeting's completed, I will hand you your permit.
Right.
So that's an incentive for the builder to have the meeting quickly.
Right. And we usually host those meetings within the week. I mean, I think
But if there's language that says at least 10 days out, that's what I'm
not
arguing
no,
for
that language is what was there, what Ron had drafted. It doesn't have to be 10 days. It has to be enough time to notify residents.
3 days?
Well,
It can be like the same day because no one can make it.
Yeah, 7. I think we...
Generally speaking, 7 or more, because you want to account for vacation.
Right.
If the notice arrives while someone's on vacation, they're not going to see it.
So I think we should say no less than 7 days. Does anybody have do you have a problem with that yet? Of 7 days?
Doug, what would this be like if you're a builder? I mean...
I think it's reasonable. 7 to 10 days is
Because they're going to be planning, bringing in materials anyway, right? 7 to 10 days.
Well, once you get the permit, they usually they have to schedule the subs, get there, like put in southern control, order some supplies. So they're not out there the next day usually. They might, for a demolition permit, start the next day, but typically it's about a week to 10 days.
But the demolition is a separate permit from the building permit, is that right?
It's a separate permit, but they usually issue it simultaneously.
Okay.
So again, I think we're just back to, do we make it as a condition of the permit, listed where all the other conditions of the permit are, or do we have to codify it?
So let me ask a question. When it was done informally in the past, are you guys aware of any issues when we wanted to have this meeting but the builder was resistant to it?
Yes. I mean, just most
We just
recently
had one,
on the
yeah.
phone.
Just recently there was. In the past,
But
I
it
had
wasn't
never.
stated as a condition
No.
on the permit.
But it's never been stated as a condition.
but
So maybe if we state it as a condition, they'll be aware that they have to have this.
Right.
And then if it's the only time that it's happened, could be sufficient just to leave it that way.
Yeah, and I don't recall anything in the past where the builder, architect, resident refused to meet.
Well, even, I mean, this builder, for instance, she had worked on a different house in the village and had agreed to a meeting before. So the only reason she didn't is because she had asked us if it was still a requirement, and I told her no. And then we, after getting feedback, decided that it would make sense to have a meeting. And she kind of said, well, that ship has sailed.
And I think the reason is, if my memory is correct, when we kind of stopped doing it, is that nobody came to the meetings. The builders and architects and people showed up, and there was no...
And the residents?
There was no attendance.
Well, but I think then at least we've met our obligation to the residents. I mean, I think that's unfortunate, but boy, I came.
All our neighbors came, that was only 2 years ago.
Right.
People come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Are we agreed?
Okay, we're agreed.
What did we decide?
Oh, sorry, what did we agree on? Did you
So
agree on?
precondition, but not codified?
Not codified. Okay.
What do you mean not, yes, I want it codified so that it stays,
I guess we did not agree.
so that it stays, so that somebody can't just,
So there's on the permit, there's a list of conditions.
right?
So my suggestion is just to add it to that list.
Just so
and
there's
not
a
put it in
check,
the code.
there's a box you check off.
Yeah, so you agree that you will have this meeting.
But the reason to put it into the code would be that someone in the future can't just take that out of the permit.
Well, and let me give you another, I'll play devil's advocate. So our code states that the manager may impose permit conditions necessary for the public health, safety, and welfare. So on that standard list, all those conditions on the standard list are subject to the argument that they are not necessary for the public health, safety, and welfare, and therefore are unlawfully imposed.
You mean somebody could argue that?
Yes, if you put it in the code, there's no argument as to whether or not it can be required.
Okay. So that's an argument for putting it into the code.
Yes, if be required.
Right, and so I'm saying more than I would want to say on the public record.
So we can
Depending
stop.
on what you decide. But
So that's an argument for putting it in the code.
Record. Okay. So
you could have all your whereases
yes.
that say
right,
this
like if we had
is
a permit
public interest.
condition that says all doors must be painted green,
right.
Someone would argue that that's an unlawful condition because it's not necessary for the public health, safety, and welfare. I don't think this meeting is necessary either.
Right.
So
okay.
I'm going to sue you.
Okay. So in view of that. So do we need a motion? Or do you rewrite it and then we can...
Yeah. No motion is necessary, but just let me clarify what you're agreeing on.
Right.
It's not my fault this time.
All right, so we are going to codify the pre-construction meeting.
Yes.
But it's not a pre-permit meeting, it's just a pre-construction.
Yes, right.
Okay, and there'll be 7 days' notice to the public.
Right.
Okay, got it.
May I ask a question? I know this is out of order.
Yes. Yes to both of those.
At what point is, at some point this starts with an application. At what point can the neighbors adjacent properties or across the street properties that are impacted by the new construction given a chance for input?
It would be at the, formally, it would be at this meeting.
But okay.
Yeah. Informally, you can walk up to them and say, what you doing?
Well, I've had experience over the years, and a long time ago, there was a lot of advance, and I got really good information, and I had a chance for input, and this was in the application process before the permits were issued. Most recently, my information came after the permit is issued, and as a result, there was things done to my property without the benefit of surveys provided to me or anyone for me to determine what was going on. And I would like for owners, adjacent property owners who are impacted by construction to have input before permits are issued, before the pre-permit consultation. This should all be part of the conditions that go back to the builder.
Well, the reason this meeting is going to be held prior to the issuance of the building permit. I mean, it's, so after this meeting, the building permit?
That's not what we just agreed on.
Okay. What did we agree to?
After
It's a
the issuance
condition of the permit so as to not give the perception that there is an opportunity to have leverage over the plans.
Right.
See, one issue that comes up that Lynn is perhaps referring to, that sometimes there are issues between neighbors, between neighboring owners, and these become private issues rather than public issues. If they're meeting the code, there are formal legal things that we review. If they're doing something to your property, that's something between neighbors.
No, but if it happens where things happen on my property which become permanent, and I don't have enough information to determine, where this is happening, then I feel I've been damaged, and that has happened to me recently. Long ago, I had enough information to know, that I could determine whether or not that was not going to happen. So the information coming to me is quite different now than what it had been. And I think an adjacent property owner should have complete information, a really good set of survey drawings, as far as everything that's going to be done, all the levels of the house, and so that they have an opportunity to address this and perhaps come up with a condition that you would all agree to.
What do we have now? So when someone's doing a construction project and residents are notified, your next door neighbor is doing X, Y, and Z, the plans are reviewable in the village office, right? We give that notice before permits are issued now.
Yeah.
After the permit.
After permit.
After the
Yeah.
No, upon application, you're right.
What? That we notify the neighbors?
We notify the neighbors. that the plans
Upon application. You haven't been notifying the neighbors upon application.
Right.
Okay, so there is a, Lynn, if I haven't lost it yet, Ron's gonna check, that if you have a construction project that's happening next to you, you should get a notice that says, the village has received an application to do X, Y, and Z at this address. Sometimes there's a little sketch in the notice, and it also, I think, says something along the lines of, plans are available for viewing in the village office.
Yeah, well, the last little sketch that I got was barely decipherable because it was shrunk down and it was so small I had to use a magnifying glass to read it.
Sure.
And that I don't think cuts it.
Okay, so what
Plans
are
are
we saying,
available
Ron?
in the village office.
Well, the first time this ever happened to me, the plans were provided to me on a voluntary basis, and they were very legible.
So what is the code or the?
Yeah, written notification of any application for a building permit will be promptly delivered by the village to all properties that border.
This is on application.
Directly face, the property.
Border or, I'm sorry, was the...
Adjoining or confronting.
That doesn't always happen, though. I mean, adjoining properties.
It will going forward.
Yes.
So that's been clarified.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for letting me interrupt.
No, it turns out it was valuable for us to have you interrupt.
And I meant to point this out at the beginning of my presentation, and I didn't. It was an important distinguishing factor between the village and the town. The town has much smaller lots and many more building regulations and many more applications for variances, and the pre-permit consultation meeting helps to eliminate some variance requests, because if an applicant hears from the neighbors, we're going to oppose you on this variance, then they tend more to work things out. But in Martin's Additions, we got bigger lots, less regulations, and very, very few variants.
Yeah, right. Okay, I think that helped clarify everything.
Yes. So enough on that?
Yeah.
Okay, and Ron, to amend the code on construction of curb cuts, driveways, and aprons.
Okay, this is the second reading of this ordinance. It's not yet been introduced. We discussed it at the last meeting and talked about adding a requirement, which has been added. So again, at the urging of the audience, some meeting ago, we discussed codifying the rules for maintenance of driveway aprons. Because driveway aprons are within the public right-of-way, the village maintains them after they've been initially installed by the owner. Questions have arisen as to what should be done if there's been a owner betterment, or to use Mr. Wheely's term, a worserment. And so this This ordinance, as revised from the last draft we looked at, would provide that, again, as is current practice, owners install it initially, we'll maintain it going forward. If there's a betterment, we won't touch it. If someone has a betterment that they feel is a worsenement and they want to abandon it, they can do so, and we will put it on the schedule for our next repair, and we'll restore it to the basic village state.
I think your draft just handles it perfectly now. Just the the introduction of an owner, if an owner wants to abandon a betterment, that does the trick.
Great.
Okay. What?
It's great.
Okay. So, do we introduce this?
Yes. Well, Tiffany, you have a...
Does this, and I apologize, I wasn't at the last meeting, so does this address the issue of, in some places of the village, the driveway apron and the curb might be the entirety of what's in the right-of-way? In other places of the village, there might be a driveway apron, a curb, and a part of the driveway above that that's still in the right-of-way. Does this address maintenance
of the
driveway that's still in the right-of-way?
No, this would only apply to the apron. However, you raise a question.
What's an apron?
How do you define apron in that situation where the right-of-way is very wide? Let me see if
there is a definition of an apron, isn't there?
Yeah.
As I recall.
Curb cut driveway or apron.
Definitions. Curb cut.
I wonder, while Ron looks at that, if we want to move ahead with the treasurer's report, and so that we keep the meeting moving.
Curb cut, Ron. Look at curb cut. Okay, treasurer's report. We got a lot of money.
But we're going to blow it all on speed bumps.
And lights on street.
No, where is my treasurer's report? I have to refresh my memory.
Number 6.
Right, okay. Our January distribution from the state income tax was about normal $8,000. Our liability from the wind case has been rising at a slow but steady rate as more and more back taxes are filed. And the last time we looked at, it was estimated it was about $150,000 liability. It's now up to $182,000. We have reserved $150,000. According to the comptroller, thinks that we're kind of near the end. All the late filers have filed. All the deadlines are passing. There will be some final estimations, but we should be pretty close to it by now. So we may want to increase the reserve to cover the $182,000, bump it up to $190,000 or something of that sort, to make sure we have the money in the bank to
So
to
is
cover
that
this.
is that a motion?
I could make a motion to have a budget amendment to increase our reserves for wind case liability from $150,000 to $190,000.
And is there a second?
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Okay, a
thank you.
second budget amendment is for our website hosting. We had budgeted $1,500. We are moving to a new host, and there are certain investment costs for getting it up and running. According to the estimates of the village manager, $7,000 should cover both the running costs and the investment costs, and give us a little bit of extra in case anything unforeseen comes up. So I suggest bumping up our budget allocation for our online presence from $1,500 to $7,000 for this year. That will cover the investment costs, one-time investment costs.
Okay, is that a motion?
I will make a motion to do so.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And when we've compiled the budget for next year, we will have to go back to see what our running costs are at that point with the new host.
So has a decision been made? I'm sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, that's the manager report,
Yes, my bad.
but, yeah.
No, I'll wait.
There's one other, just to alert you, next month we may need something for the traffic engineering, since we are placing more and more requirements on our traffic engineer. We may have to up the budget for that as well.
Take it out of the snow shoveling.
Take it out of the snow.
Okay.
Okay.
Ron
Well,
had a question.
is there a motion to,
Ron had a question.
okay, about the treasurer's report?
Yes. Arthur, I don't recall, does the village have any liability for the misallocation of taxpayer addresses? Or are we on?
We got all that money
We were on
last
the
year.
receiving end. Okay.
We've received it. Yeah, that was a big lump sum. I can't remember. It was a lot. As far as I know, we're done with that.
A motion to accept the treasurer's report as presented.
I move to approve it.
Second? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Ron, should we move with the manager's report?
Oh, no, I'm ready.
Okay.
So, yeah, Tiffany raises a good point.
What's an apron?
As currently written, we would maintain everything that's within the right-of-way. So if there are rights-of-way that are wider than others, that would mean we'd be repairing a portion of someone's driveway. So if you found that to be an issue you want to avoid, we could include a definition of apron and restrict it to a certain dimension.
And that the driveway that's on the right-of-way would be at the property owner's responsibility.
Right. Yeah, we could say, for example, the village will repair that portion of the apron from the street surface to the outside edge of the sidewalk, or you could say a distance of feet, but we should probably look at a map to make sure we're capturing it.
Yeah, since this has never arisen in the past,
Oh, it has.
once, it's arisen in a different sort of way that we've addressed, the abandonment of a betterment.
Well, and maybe Matt or Doug could explain what's normal practice when you go out and repair the street and aprons. How do you decide how far to go up the driveway?
It seemed to me like there was kind of a standard trapezoidal shape for the entrance of that is sort of the entrance to a driveway, and then commonly there's another square section after that. That was what I was that was what we were doing.
So the contractors had this image in mind of what an apron was.
I think generally, but I'm happy to go back and have a quick conversation with
Veers.
Joe Kucho, AB Veers to.
Yeah, and
It also comes into play if you have an apron and with a sidewalk, or if you just have somebody who has an apron.
Yes, because we have a lot of areas without sidewalks.
So I don't have I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I don't have the trapezoidal standard with me. Doug, do you have it? Yeah. But the county publishes standards for aprons, and what Matt just said reminded me of that. You could discern from these standards what an apron is.
Just to be clear, I'm not advocating, but I think the apron, and if we have a public sidewalk there, that's ours to maintain. I want it to be clear, though, what is ours to maintain versus what a resident may have put in the right-of-way as part of their driveway.
So Ron, what you have there, is that a county standard?
It is.
Okay.
Yes, and these are applicable in the village as well, because we mandate that county standards be complied with.
So maybe we can just refer to if those are sufficient. Can we refer to the counties?
Yeah, there's no.
But that isn't addressing this issue of
the radius.
The depth of
runs to the sidewalk with no specific distance mandated.
I mean, we have some places where our right-of-way is 3 feet, and some places where the right-of-way is 17.
25.
I mean, I think theoretically that square section is the sidewalk, but there are instances where we don't have a sidewalk, so it's just kind of a random square.
But it might be possible to capture them all with one measurement. Like if we know there is no instance where it would be more than 15 feet.
Right, not to exceed.
Right, yeah.
That's a nice way to do it, not to exceed amount.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not
Or we could leave it to
unnecessarily slowing up
discretion
the process.
of the contractor on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
I'm ensuring that we're protected in the future from questions about
Right.
what is ours to repair and what is our president's.
So, should we send you back to the drawing board one more time on this?
Not
And
to-
we will-
The average length is? I think that should help our.
Yeah, I
And
think-
how far away are we from that in the village?
I think I defer to you guys to figure out how to.
I think in language that says not to exceed.
Yes.
Yeah, that
We'd-
sounds
we'd
right, but
do
we
it.
need
Then we
to
just need-
understand
we
what
will.
that length is.
Right, we have to put in a number.
Right.
Okay. Moving on.
Enough.
Wait, so we are deferring this again.
Yes. Manager's report.
This never ends.
Or do you want Doug to give his first so then he can leave?
Sure. Okay.
In as much as he's on the...
Every meeting, don't you?
I'm sorry, Doug, to have pulled it out of order.
It's pretty much the same as last month.
Okay.
It is 3405, 3407 Thornapple. The house was moved this week from 05 to 07.
Right.
They are now working on pouring the basement walls, and they're going to be, it's going to take about 2 to 3 weeks, they said.
Okay.
They're going to be working on the interior and the additions. So everything is moved over, and you sent the email right about the possibility of next door.
That in the Bethesda beat, the builder was quoted as saying they have plans to develop on 3407, but we haven't received any plans yet for that. So.
Okay.
That construction is going on, and then it'll probably take several months.
Okay.
That's pretty much the only change from last month.
Okay. Thank you. So did you want to leave too?
Yeah, thanks.
I don't know. Well, I don't know.
I just don't have to get up again. Cause another trip hazard.
No, because we're going to just have the manager's report. I think we're good.
Yeah, and I'll be brief.
Oh, are you dismissed?
So we're waiting for approval from state archives for transfer of old building plans. We have a bunch of old ones from years ago that there's just taking up space at this point. We can always bring them back if for some reason we need to take a look at them, but don't necessarily need them in the office right now. We've finalized our contract with Integrated Plant Care to continue with Paul Wolf and Integrated Plant Care as our arborist moving forward. Same with our contract with Wayne C. Fowler of Blue Crab Contracting to continue in his role with the village moving forward. We are working on an RFP for the GIS system, and I'm hoping to circulate a draft within the next week or so. And we selected Revise Software Systems to redesign our website. So they sent us over a questionnaire to look at, and actually it might be something that I could send out to residents. They gave 3 separate sort of draft design website. One's like a very modern, one's a very traditional, one's sort of a hybrid, and so they just asked for feedback on that. So I'll circulate that out to residents to solicit feedback on that.
For consideration by the staff.
Right. We worked out an agreement, WSSC, to receive reimbursement for road repairs. They They had told me that they're going to have a public outreach meeting sometime in March to go over plans with the community once they've selected the subcontractor for the additional work that they'll be doing in the fall. So once they set a date and let us know on that, we'll send that out to residents. Street lights, the stock numbers were approved by Pepco, and they're doing the install designs. The guy, I was kind of pushing him. He said that he's going to move it to the front of his list, and I also got him to talk with Hall of Fame to keep them in conversation with each other, and apparently they're going to send in that finalized design by the end of February, and Hall of Fame said it would take about 6 months, or 6 weeks to fill the order. They said, sorry.
This says that the install designs have begun, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So, but then we don't have the lights yet. This is very good.
So the install designs include like the mast and things like that. So there, a lot of it is like he described it as sort of a how-to instructions manual, basically on how to physically install these lights.
Okay.
And apparently all that needs to go. And apparently the mast is, for some reason, the arm is the most confusing thing. That's what the Hall of Fame guy also told me.
Phil, that when we had these installed, just our prototype, we had a guy dedicated to this with his own truck and the what do you call the thing that goes up, the crane, the lifter. It took him like 4 times going back and forth. He didn't have the right tools. It didn't fit. They had to get a different mast. The bolts didn't match. So I was surprised. He was surprised at how long it took just to install one. And that's what has to be. They had to come up with the drawings of the engineers, the instructions, and do that. So that's the little bit of engineering that they have to
these
do.
technical specs for the actual install of it. So,
So when can we expect the actual lights?
So it looks like, then
April.
Hopefully
April.
mid-April,
Do
which is, I think, the last time that we had a substantial update on them, they had estimated about April. So we're still looking at that.
Can I just interrupt for a minute, because Ron and Doug came back with, I think, a question or a solution.
Okay. Oh, solutions
So
are even better.
1 second. Thank you.
So I really like Doug's solution, and that is because he said how I wrote it was perfect already. So the county standards actually define the apron to include all of that is within the right-of-way. These standards do go to the property line. And the minimum apron that is needed apparently to address slope and whatnot is 11 feet, but Doug says there's some in the village that are 16 feet. But if you're comfortable with defining the apron as all that portion of the driveway within the right-of-way, we could introduce the draft as written.
Yeah, in fact,
I have an impact question.
Yeah.
So,
some people may get 4 feet more paving than others.
Right, yeah.
what if somebody wants gold leaf?
No, it was 2 county standards.
For that?
No.
Okay.
It's just the county standards.
Yeah, they have to put in basic concrete according to these specs, and if they do something better. So they can't make a dirt
road either?
No.
Okay, good.
No,
Then I'm done.
All right.
And so we can introduce it?
Yeah, standard construction. That takes care of it. So the standard construction encompasses all that.
Correct, but as Tiffany pointed out, some people will get an extra, maybe 6 feet.
Right.
And that cuts down their cost disproportionately to others. However,
but it's on the right of way.
It's the nature. Okay.
Yeah, it's not on their private property. Good. Okay.
So we can introduce this.
Yes.
And so we're going to introduce ordinance number 1171. an ordinance to amend the Code of Ordinances to further regulate the construction of curb cuts, driveways, and aprons in the public right-of-way as presented. And is there a motion? I mean, is there a second?
Yes. Yeah, I will second it. I will second it.
Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so now this has to sit for 30 days?
Correct.
And have a public hearing?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, good.
But Doug just saved a lot of money, and unfortunately, I don't get to write it again.
Okay, thank you. And back to Matt.
Talk to him.
Last few items. We bought some cold weather patch and patched up some really bad potholes kind of along where the curb and the street are on Turner. It's not we didn't have a ton of material actually, so we had to kind of pick and choose. We got kind of what we thought were the two worst offenders. So hopefully those, seems like the material's pretty good, so that should definitely hold, at least until AB Veers comes back in late March-ish. And then the last thing is...
Did you guys look at other streets for that, or was it a specific?
Well, I know that there are other streets that have issues. The reason that we specifically went to Turner is because we had had multiple complaints in these specific areas. The others, I mean, there's a ton of potholes all throughout the village. So it was kind of trying to grease the squeaky wheel, and if it was a really serious pothole, to fix that in the meantime. And we can order other stuff if there's really particularly egregious potholes.
The only place that I would suggest is if they're in the, traffic, like in Bradley, we've got them all along the curb.
Right.
And generally speaking, you don't drive there, so it's not an issue. I noticed that there's a small one in the middle of Raymond when we came up Raymond.
There's one right in front of your house.
That you could look at it if you've got material yet to fix it.
We would have to order new stuff.
Well, it didn't look serious, but you can look at it.
It's not serious.
When does AB Veers come back? You said spring.
Not to Raymond. Raymond does.
Yeah, because the sewer work is going to be coming through.
Yeah, part of Raymond is,
But the lower part of Raymond, is that right?
The lower part of Raymond will be redone. The upper part of Raymond, it is going to have.
Well, he can do some patches.
Some patching. Yeah.
Because like they did on, okay.
If we're unseasonably warm, let's see if we can get them, get them here faster.
Yeah.
As you know, Keith has said, there will be no snow and there will be warm weather. Yeah, is dead.
Is dead, supposedly. So. The last thing is that Waste Management moved us over to a new accounts manager. So they popped over, I guess it was this week, to introduce themselves to us. This guy has more experience in municipal and government organizations, so should be good. And we sent out, or we are going to send out reminders that people can post on their refrigerators of what items are recyclable and how to recycle them.
Those have already been delivered, I hope.
Yeah, they've been. Were they sent out?
Yeah, they've already.
We got sent them out early. Yeah. Okay.
It was good to get them.
Yes, they're great.
And that's it.
What did you ever follow up? There was this request for one of our RFPs to be included in a book.
Yeah,
did you ever talk to the?
I did follow up with them, and they never didn't respond. So I guess there's probably a lot of RFPs to choose from out there. So they may have just chosen somebody else. I don't know. I tried to email them and
never.
That was it.
Okay.
Any closing comments?
Any comments from Sally,
Where do I now stand?
where are you?
You're in the village office.
You stand where you sit.
I'm wondering about the whole apron issue. It's now been settled that there is going to be a standard apron and back to the property line adjustment for all.
Oh, your issue was the betterment issue.
Right, yeah.
And do we take out the betterment and refinish it? I thought that we had decided.
Was this just decided?
So we introduced, it's not in the code, right? You voted to introduce it.
But I thought
Not
we
yet.
made a decision that we were going to do that. Is that wrong?
Yeah.
I guess I'm not sure what you're asking.
And
Ron
Sally,
Ron wrote up something to introduce something new into our code to define what is a driveway apron and what the village is responsible for, and we're waiting 30 days and having a waiting public hearing.
We'll get
for it.
back to you.
I'll come to the next meeting.
No, well, you,
Yes.
yes. Come to the next meeting. Yes, please. Yes. Okay, and maybe we will have a answer to your question before then. Okay.
Just a quick question. I just wanted to go back. I know one of the survey questions was about leaf vacuuming or whatever, and I just wondered if anything had come of that. If that's something that we're considering, maybe hiring a leaf vacuum company or whatever, whatever you call it, or is that something that's
So the discussion was that for the next budget year, we'll plan to do both in parallel.
do both?
Try it out.
As an experiment.
Okay. Wow.
So we can't get rid of the
And I will not
bags in
forget
their
that, so.
entirety due to
We have one advocate on the council for vacuuming.
We've won what?
one advocate.
No, the fact is we can't get rid of the bags
appreciate that.
entirely.
No, I wasn't proposing that. I just in support of the vacuum. I like that idea. So I
She
just,
likes the tube.
I don't have any problem with with bags too, but maybe like if some people prefer to bag, but if others want to leave theirs curbside. I don't know. I was just curious where we stood on that. That's all.
We're going to try it. We're going to experiment.
Thank you for bringing that up, and thank you for that question.
Is there?
Try to guess who the advocate.
It was not planted.
Okay, anything else? A motion to adjourn? We're adjourned. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Well, we did.
I think I still have my
In your backyard? I do. I just kind of quit because I figured, oh, that's good move. Right? City Wild.
Thank you, folks.